The best healthcare is there in ways big and small. There when we most and least expect it. We may not see it, but we feel it. It lets us know we're not in this alone. Everyone deserves a healthcare partner who never quits. One who's there for what matters. United Healthcare. There for what matters.
It's Not Your Fault is a podcast for parents, caregivers, and young people navigating the world and its challenges. Here's your host, Brandon Jones.
Back to another installment of It Is Not Your Fault, a teen mental health podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Jones. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about generation anxiety, aka Gen Z and the Alphas. Now, I went down a rabbit hole for today's podcast, and I came across a man by the name of Dr. Jonathan Haidt. And he is a prolific author. He's written several books, but I came across an article that was talking about his most recent book, which is titled Generation Anxiety. And he's talking about kids who are born after 1995 and how they have adjusted to this world. And then from that article, I went down a researching rabbit hole where I came across several different podcast interviews of his, as well as a few talks that he's given. And I've just come across things that I've known, but also the realization of what is really happening to these young people. And remember, if we're talking people who are born from 1995 till now, some of those people are parents now. You know, we're talking about folks who are actually in their 30s or approaching their 30s here pretty soon, being born in 1995. So it's important for us to understand that we're talking about two generations. And if the trends are correct, that these generations are going to have a similar effect from one generation to the next. But the article started off with a little anecdote that I want to share with you all that I found fascinating. So the article was in The Guardian. The article is titled Generation Anxiety. Smartphones have created a Gen Z mental health crisis, but there are ways to fix it. And we're going to talk about some of those ways in this podcast as well. But it kicked off with this little synopsis of what could happen. And it says, suppose that when your first child turned 9, a visionary billionaire whom you've never met chose her to join the first permanent human settlement on Mars. Unbeknown to you, she had signed herself up for the mission because she loved outer space, and besides all that, her friends have signed up as well. She begs you to let her go. You hear her desire, so before you say no, you agree to at least learn more. You learn that the reason that they're recruiting children is because they will be better to adapt to the unusual conditions of Mars than adults. If children go through puberty, it is associated growth spurt on Mars. Their bodies will also permanently be tailored to it, unlike settlers who come over as adults. You find other reasons for fear. First, there's radiation, against which Mars does not have a protective shield. And then there's the low gravity environment, which would put your child at high risk for developing deformities in their skeletons, heart, eyes, and brains. Did the planners take this vulnerability of children into account? As far as you can tell, no. So would you let her go? Of course not. You realize that there's a completely insane idea, sending children to Mars, perhaps never to return to Earth. The project leaders don't seem to know anything about child development and do not seem to care about the children's safety. Worse still, the company did not require proof of parental permission. No company could ever take our children away and endanger them without our consent. Or would they face massive liabilities, right? So it opens it up and it gives you a scenario and it says, hey, would you send your kid off to Mars under these circumstances? Because in essence, we've kind of done that with technology. So the article continues, at the turn of the millennial, technology companies create a set of world-changing products that transform life not just for adults all over the world, but also for children. 2, young people had been watching television since the 1950s, but with this new technology, being far more portable, personalized, and engaging with anything that came before. Yet the companies that developed them had done little to no research on the mental health effects. When faced with growth, evidence of their products were harming young people, they mostly engaged in denial, obfuscation, and public relations campaigns. Companies that strive to maximize engagement, quote unquote, by using psychological tricks to keep young people clicking were the worst offenders. They hooked children during their vulnerable developmental stages, while their brains were rapidly rewiring in response to the incoming stimulation. This includes social media companies, which inflicted their greatest damage on girls, and video game companies and porn sites that sunk their hooks deep into boys. By design, a slew of addictive content that entered through children's eyes and ears, and by displacing physical play and in person socializing. These companies have rewired childhood and changed human development on an almost unimaginable scale. Now, I wanted to read that first paragraph because that's the stuff that we've been talking about on this podcast for this whole time. These children are different. This world is different. And there have not been any checks and measures on how this would actually um, connect to people and how this will change people. But I want to ring the alarm and say these are not just kids anymore. These people are almost approaching middle age, which means that they'll be grandparents. So we're already 2 generations into this. The world has changed, and for us who are youth workers, parents, caregivers, I would say those older millennials and beyond, we're seeing something different with our children, which means we have to have different approaches. Dr. Haight had stated in one of his talks that that in his research or some of the research he's come across, he's noticed that children born in 1995 and beyond have done some significant things a lot less than others. He said they have not. These people have seen a decrease in these folks getting their licenses, which means they're not driving cars as much. And then you think of things like Lyft and Uber and other ride sharing opportunities and other modes of transportation, or just people not leaving their homes as much with things like DoorDash, Uber Eats, and these things where you can get things coming to you. People are not necessarily getting their driver's license as much. They've also come across that people are not utilizing alcohol. People are not this generation is drinking, it's consuming a lot less alcohol than other generations before. But if you think about it, think about the variety of drugs of choice and also the addictive factors of these devices. They don't necessarily need it. They have so many varieties of things they can try and utilize for their recreational activities. We'll say it that way. There's been a steep decrease in dates, and what we knew as dating generations ago is very different than now, where you have online dating. I know during the pandemic, a lot of people were choosing to do like speed dating on Zoom and things like that. Like dating is different. We've gone through a couple versions of hookup culture. We've gone through online dating. We've gone through these different phases, but dating is taking a significant dip, which means what? Marriage may take a significant dip. Childbirth will take a significant dip. If you don't have people engaging in the ritual of dating, you don't necessarily have families being created long term. So that's an interesting factor. We may see a decrease in population due to that. And then also, this one is one that I pay a lot of attention to because I do a lot of leadership work outside of just doing children's mental health stuff, is that these people don't work for pay. They work for passion and somewhat pleasure. They're not, even though we need resources to survive, you need money. These folks aren't necessarily aiming towards, having the high career. They're aiming for the passion and the pleasure of doing the work that they enjoy. And what that does is it relooks at work-life balance. And it also relooks at motivation. So how we used to approach business in the past, we can't approach business like that anymore. Which means what? Which means if you're a young person, you're a teenager, how do employers who employ teens, how do they connect with them to make their jobs attractive enough for these young people to be invested? If you're a young person getting ready to go to college, or if you are college, how do you make sure you are offering majors that make sense that people go into? We may see college majors disappear due to young people just not being interested in doing that type of work. And then you add on the complex factor of artificial intelligence and other versions of technology that are here. We are in a very interesting time, and I think we're at a cusp. We're coming around this corner of how society is changing, and it's being driven by our children. Another thing that Dr. Jonathan Haidt talks about is this coddling of the American mind, and he talks in his book, and I'm going to get this book because I just heard snippets of him talking about the book. I haven't read the book, but I'm going to definitely read this. He talks about how we created this. We've coddled and we've created this generation that we're now starting to see that we don't like, and it's uncomfortable and it's different. Does it mean that it's bad? Not necessarily, but it is something that we have not experienced. So we have to figure out a way to either redirect or accept this, or really what I think the solution is finding a common ground. We might not be able to redirect any of this, and we will have to accept a lot of what this is. And in our exception of what this is, we're going to have to lean into some of this technology in order to make sure that that our children have somewhat successful and stable lives. I don't know any parents that um don't want their child to be successful and have stability into adulthood, but this is definitely what we're dealing with. So here are some tips, because I wanted to make sure that I didn't just bring the bad news. I wanted to introduce this author. I think if you are a reader, definitely want to check out his books. If you are somebody who doesn't like to read, I would say go to YouTube and put in Jonathan Haidt. It's Haidt, and you can find tons of podcast episodes and him speaking at conferences and lectures and things of that nature, video clips where he's talking about this. This is an important thing for us to pay attention to, especially if you're a parent, a caregiver, or a youth worker, or maybe you're an educator, somebody who works in I call youth workers educators, and anybody who works with young people. You want to know what's happening. You want to know what's happening. And if you're a young person, I would encourage you too to definitely go to YouTube and check it out. Check out the podcast so you understand what your generation is going through. A lot of young people don't care. They're just living their lives. It makes sense to me. But you want to make sure that that you're aware of what's happening so that you can set yourself up for success as well. So here are some of the article shared some of the strategies to help us escape these traps. And they say collective action problems require collective responses. Parents can support one another by sticking together. Therefore, there are four main types of collective responses that each of us can bring about major change. The first one is no smartphones before the age of 10. Parents should delay their children's entry into the round the world clock internet access by giving only basic phones with limited apps and no internet browsing before the age of 14. Now, my child right now, she's getting ready. My oldest child is getting ready to turn 11. Actually, found out recently my children are not Gen Z. They're actually alphas. I don't know how I missed that, but all my children are alphas. I thought I had Gen Z children, but I don't. So I have an 11-year-old. She does not have a phone, or she's almost 11. She does not have a phone, but she is burning to get one. That's the only thing she wants for her birthday coming up. I am resistant towards it. She already has an iPad, and they have enough access to all this stuff now. She really doesn't need the phone. The only difference between the phone and the iPad, honestly, is the ability to just make the phone call. She can do everything else on the iPad, but she wants that phone. She wants that device. That device is a status symbol for her. No social media before the age of 16. Let children get through most of their vulnerable periods of brain development before connecting them to the avalanche of social comparison and say this word out loud, algorithmical chosen influencers. Now, none of my children have social media, but they do have access to social media because a lot of social media becomes shareable. So they're familiar with these apps. They're not necessarily on them. Phone-free schools. This is important because I know a lot of schools they've started phone-free and they've leaned back because so many young people were just breaking the rules. Schools must insist that students store their phones, smartwatches, and any other devices in a phone lockers during the school day, as per the new non-statutory guidance issues by the UK government. This is the only way to free up their attention for one another and for their teachers. So, got to get rid of the phones and the devices in schools if they're not using them for educational purposes only. And then number 4 is far more unsupervised play and childhood independence. Sorry, let me read that again. Far more unsupervised play and childhood independence. So that's a way for children to naturally. Oh, article reset on me. That's the way for children to naturally develop their social skills, overcome anxiety, and become self governing young adults. These four reforms are not hard to implement. If many of us do them at the same time, they cost almost nothing. They will work even if we never get help from our legislators or from our tech giants, which continue to resist the pressures to protect young users' safety and well being. If most of the parents in schools and a community were to enact all four, I believe, I, as in the author of this article, would be the substantial improvements in adolescent mental health within 2 years. Given that AI and spatial computing, such as Apple's new Vision Pro goggles, which are crazy, are about to make the virtual world far more immersed and addictive, I think the better way is to start today. And this article was done by again, this was in the Guardian. The author of this article, let me get this so I can reference this person. Uh, I don't see their name. Ah, all right, messing up my podcast. All right, I'll just post the article on the Facebook page. That is just search "It Is Not Your Fault" podcast on Facebook, and you can find this article plus other podcast episodes that we've done on the show. I cannot find the author to this article, which is crazy. But what I want to say, oh, Betsy Reed. Oh, I've read some of Betsy Reed's. I'm familiar with her work. So Betsy Reed is one of the editors at The Guardian, and she is the contributor for this article. So what I wanted to say is this. We cannot escape this technological boom that we have with our young people. The best that we can do is lean in and protect our kids as much as possible. Our children are not going to have the same childhood that I had, that you had, or that we think they should have. So we can't escape this. Everything is attached to the internet. Everything is attached to a device. Some schools are dependent, man. If you have the internet down at school, this is even some workplaces, the work stops. We can't escape this. So we have to figure out ways to set some regulation and some boundaries and some control measures in for our children so that they can develop healthily as possible, given the state that we're in. I also want to say that I don't think that it's on the tech giants or legislators to make the change. The change starts within the household. The change starts with cultivating those dynamics within your family. Now, does that mean that the legislators and the tech giants don't have some responsibility? No. But in that pie of responsibility, we have the biggest slice. It is our job to take care of our children to make sure that they have a good enough foundation so that they have a good enough future. So keep your head up. Keep tuning into podcasts like this and other podcasts so that you are informed and you know what's going on. But don't think that the technology is going to disappear because it is here to stay. And as much as I say that as a millennial, I am very sucked into the technology myself. But I look at my kids and I'm like, holy cow, they are so much more advanced in a lot of things than I am. And I use this stuff every day. So it's here. This is a part of the new development, it's a part of their life. It may seem like a sci-fi movie, it may seem scary, but it is what it is. And I say that because, again, I don't want you to be scared of this stuff. I want you to be informed and prepared for what's happening. Okay, I've run my mouth for way too long. This podcast has gone on way longer than we normally do. Again, my name is Brandon Jones. This is Not Your Fault, a teen mental health podcast. Um, Make sure you check us out. There's 3 places you can do that. Again, the Facebook page, type in "It's Not Your Fault" podcast in the searcher. You can find us. You can find the article I talked about today, as well as other articles and podcast episodes. You can find me at my own website, www.jegna.org. That's JEGNA.org, where you can reach out to me for various different things. And if you like the podcast, check out our network, ShalettaMakesMeLaugh.com. That's Shaletta makesmelaugh.com, where you can find myself and other amazing podcasters informing you on how to improve and live a life of sustainability and well-being. Well, that's going to do it for today's podcast. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care of yourself. Peace.
To check out previous episodes of It's Not Your Fault, or to learn more about Brandon Jones, log on to ShalettaMakesMeLaugh.com.
It's not just another day in your life. Things are changing for the better. At Comcast, we see those changes, and we're thinking about how we use technology today to live, work, learn, and play. And we're building for the future now, so we're better prepared for the wants and needs of tomorrow. That's why Comcast is rolling out multi-gig internet speeds to more than 50 million homes and businesses before the end of 2025, making our already industry-leading network even faster, smarter, greener, and more reliable. Over the decades, Comcast has been your partner, working hard to serve your community, and will continue to be your partner. We're expanding our gigabits so you can enjoy the tiny bits that matter most.
You know Shaletta makes you laugh, but did you know Shaletta Brundage can also make you think and boost your business? Media personality, activist, and comedian Shaletta Brundage founded Shaletta Makes Me Laugh to celebrate and share the best of Black culture. It's a podcasting platform. You can download 10 weekly podcasts hosted by African-American subject experts at ShalettaMakesMeLaugh.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. ShalettaMakesMeLaugh.com is also a production house, creating broadcast-quality commercial content. And Shaletta and her team of storytellers create powerful promotional campaigns to get businesses the brand awareness they're looking for. Some of Minnesota's top businesses trust Shaletta, and you can too. Get out the word about your events and products and get in front of communities of color with ShalettaMakesMeLaugh.com. She's got the power to help your business.
If you're pregnant or recently delivered a baby, you're at greater risk for getting very sick from COVID-19 compared to the general population. Getting COVID-19 during pregnancy also puts you at an increased risk of having a preterm birth. That's why it's so important to protect yourself from getting COVID-19 at this time. The most important step is getting your updated COVID-19 vaccine. The vaccine is also strongly recommended if you're breastfeeding or considering pregnancy in the future. While you're pregnant, transmission of coronavirus to your child is unlikely, but a newborn could get COVID-19 after birth. Babies can get their own COVID-19 vaccine once they're 6 months of age. It's natural to have questions about COVID-19 during this important time. So talk to your trusted prenatal healthcare provider and then your baby's pediatrician. They'll be able to give you advice on the best steps to take to keep everyone in the family safe and healthy.
Are you a woman known as a good listener? Do you have skills in de-escalating situations? Are you what they call a people person? Then the Minneapolis Police Department would like to meet you. Now in a rebuilding phase, the Minneapolis Police Department is recruiting more women to wear the badge. The department offers career options for women with a high school diploma or GED. There are also opportunities for women with 2- and 4-year degrees who are ready to apply their skills in new ways. Police work makes a great second career for social workers, teachers, nurses. Women in their 30s and 40s are welcome to apply. There's no age cap. You'll be paid while you train and mentored by veteran women officers invested in your success. Minneapolis also welcomes current police officers to join the state's largest department. Make a difference on the streets, working in your community, in a career with competitive salaries and generous benefits. Go to minneapolismn.gov and search police jobs to find out more.
If you live in an older home, it may contain lead-based paint on walls, woodwork, and windows. Even more bad news, lead exposure can be dangerous to young children and impact their brain development. And now, the good news. Hennepin County will fix lead hazards in your home at no cost to you.
We were worried because of the paint in the windows in the bedroom. They were peeling and chipping, and we know that when paint peels and chips and it looks a certain way, that's possibly lead. We were worried for our children more so than anything.
Eligible homes can qualify for up to $15,000 in upgrades. You may even qualify for new energy-efficient windows. Don't worry, Hennepin County has a trusted list of pre-approved contractors. You won't even have to find companies with correct licenses or certifications.
I've just done a test and it's positive. So we know that this is lead-based paint, and then we know it's a hazard because it's creating dust every time this window moves and opens. And if you look in here, that's just full of lead paint chips.
You won't have to stay with your cousin while you're getting the lead out. Hennepin County even pays for you and your family to stay in a hotel while the work is underway. The last good news is how easy it is to apply. Just go to hennepin.us/lead control to get started.
I'm really happy with the program. We can go to bed knowing that our children are safe.
That's hennepin.us/lead control. Tell your friends about it.
People say we're made up. Tall tales. Myths. Think what you want about us, but we can all be certain of this. Recycling is real, and it works. But what happens to your recycling once it leaves your home? Recycled glass is sorted in St. Paul. Then the clear glass is made into bottles for drinks, pickles, salad dressing, and more in Shakopee. At other facilities, plastic bottles get made into new plastic bottles. Recycling exists. Learn the real story behind recycling.